Bill, I
Sure.
appreciate you coming on. Thank you for your time.
Truly my pleasure. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, so you got the shirt on that Eat Like a Human. Your book is fantastic. First off, I mean, it's one of my favorite nutrition books I've ever read, and we can get into why later. Just because it's so simple, it's so holistic, and I think it's so pragmatic. So I wanted to thank you for writing that. It really is a great resource.
Well, thank you for that feedback. It means more than you know. Thank you.
This is unrelated to food, but am I correct in remembering that you wrestled?
I did. I
Do you
did.
still do
It's not
any?
unrelated at all. It's directly related. Yeah.
Do you do any grappling or anything like that now?
No, I wrestled in high school. I wrestled for Ohio State. I wrestled for the College of New Jersey, and then I did some coaching when my son was real young. But he didn't like wrestling as much as I did. He's a fantastic soccer and lacrosse player.
There you go.
So coaching wise, but I haven't grappled at all recently. How about you?
Yeah. I do jujitsu, and that's the reason I asked because I played baseball in high school and college, so we have that college athletic relation. But I was actually telling my sister's she's younger than me, some of her friends a while back. Like I used to think the wrestlers were kind of weird. I was like, those are like the weird guys. And now I wish so badly that I wrestled in high school. I wish it. Honestly, I don't want to take things back, but it's a more useful sport, and it would have definitely made me better at jujitsu.
Well, you're right in that we're weird for sure. But it was such an important part of my life. I had fantastic coaches, I had fantastic teammates, but I really loved that weird gray area between it being an individual sport and a team sport at the same time. And I learned a lot about myself wrestling for sure because of that individual kind of ownership of success and failure at the same time, right?
Well, you said it's directly related to the food in the book. How so?
One of the stories that or ways I talk about my relationship with food is to start out. My relationship with food when I was very young was one of disgust. Like food, I was heavy as a kid. I had all sorts of bowel issues, and I knew food was something that I needed to eat. I liked it way too much, but it was something that every time I ate it, I felt guilty. Right? I always overate. I worry, ate something, and all of a sudden I'm looking in a mirror like it was making an impact in 30 seconds. Right? And I had this very unhealthy relationship with food until I became an athlete, and that weird unhealthy relationship with food transformed because of wrestling into another different weird unhealthy relationship with food. Food now was something that I was scared of. Food is now something that would cause me to not be able to make weight. And for as important as it was in high school, when I got to college and the demands of Division One wrestling, it was a completely different level. I would lose 21 pounds in a day and a half every single week, pure water weight. And then the cycle was we would weigh in on Fridays, no matter where we were wrestling. We could be wrestling in Michigan, we could be wrestling in Wisconsin, wherever we were wrestling. We would weigh in honor system on a Friday night, and our coach was, I mean, he was serious. Like you needed to make weight to the gram. But in order to make weight on that Friday to wrestle on Saturday, we'd start on Wednesday, and it was a whole system of losing a massive amount of water weight. It was incredibly unhealthy and terrible for my heart. I'm sure I have some long term damage. And then we'd make weight on Friday, and then the Ohio State would take us to Bob Evans, and we would gorge ourselves. We hadn't eaten in days, gorge ourselves on Bob Evans, and just for as much as wrestling and food or should be in the same conversation. Food and going to the bathroom need to be in the same conversation. I remember, we'd gorge ourselves, our digestive tracts were all screwed up. And then, the next three times we went to the bathroom, it was pure liquid. It was terrible. And then I'd step on the mat on a Saturday, the same weight I started at the beginning of the week. And it was the most ridiculous thing ever. But my sophomore year, I think it was my sophomore, junior year, three kids died wrestling in college. It was like 92, 93. And the NCAA put in a whole bunch of new laws and regulations or whatever. And I know a lot of it has changed, but it's still, I remember just going, it took me until I was in my 30s to look at food and see a source of nourishment. Food, I would always look at food and see something that was dark about the food, something that made me feel bad in a very weird way.
Yeah, relate to the wrestling thing a little bit, I went to Virginia Tech, who has a very good wrestling team,
Yes.
wrestling program, and became friends with some of the wrestlers, and it's definitely changed. Like they're not, as far as I know, not kids aren't dying because like overusing the sauna and stuff like that. But it really is an incredibly, it's different than every other college sport in my opinion in terms of the relationship it requires with food. Because like you play football, it's like okay, I'm just trying to get massive, and then I don't have to worry about cutting. Baseball, same type of deal. I was a pitcher, so I was just trying to get as big as I could so I could throw harder. Wrestling has this really unique um, and taxing relationship with food, and perhaps like that relationship is what led you down to the path of like devoting your life to it.
Oh, I'm sure it is. But and think about how crazy this is. Listen, I know I'm convinced that it has played a very large role in what I'm doing now and why it's my life's mission. But this is how insane the entire situation was. We're talking about I was wrestling in the early '90s, or high school in the late '80s, and then college in the early '90s. And this was we were still in the middle of this. Athletes should be carbing up, and if you want to get ready for competition, you should eat a plate of pasta with nothing on it. I mean, don't even put butter on it because you shouldn't have all this fat. And certainly, we were fat phobic because we were worried about putting weight on. But here we are trying to lose massive amounts of weight. And we have these team sponsored dinners where we go and eat nothing but white pasta. Like one of the most inflammatory things we could be doing, or we're trying to lose water from our bodies. Everything we were doing was fighting each, and it's no surprise that we all had such an unhealthy relationship with food. And in fact, you can spot a former college or sorry, a former wrestler, because most of them, when they hit their 40s or 50s, are completely out of shape, like completely out of shape, no matter how toned or amazing they were in their teens and their 20s. So many of us have put on so much massive weight because we were doing everything. That relationship was so incredibly unhealthy.
Have you worked with any wrestling teams or anything like that as you've gotten older?
Not when after I stopped competing in college, I helped coach a bunch of different teams, mostly high school teams, and helped out with some college here and there, just a few practices. But I helped coach with a bunch of different high schools, and this was still at a time when I really didn't understand food the way that I understand it now. And I would love the opportunity to help make a
Yeah,
difference now with this different understanding.
I think that'd be really cool. I think you'd have especially from my lens as a jujitsu practitioner, you could call it. Um, there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of valuable knowledge that could be transferred
Yeah.
in that regard. Because I'm sure I was a college athlete 3 years ago, and the nutrition advice we got, even my 21, 22-year-old self, I'd be like, yeah, I'm probably not going to listen to that. I'm going to go ahead and like do my own research because this just doesn't make any sense to me. But so you went to college obviously as a wrestler. A lot of things happened in the time between then and then the show that you were on. Do you want to speak about the show that you were on, because that's like one of the uh, coolest experiences I think anybody I've talked to has had.
Yeah, and it was so. It's so. We just had a group in here at the Eastern Shore Food Lab, our nonprofit high school group, and my wife Christina and I, they were from a local high school, and we were talking about job skills and business and all this. That's why they were here. And Christina and I were telling our story about how we got to where we are now, and now that we own a restaurant and this nonprofit and the kind of work that we're doing. And one of the things that became apparent, just like in this conversation now with you, is that we have done so many like very different things, but they all are leading to this same endpoint. We're really focused on nourishment and community and connection and that sort of thing. And wrestling was part of it, and in good and bad ways. But the show was a huge part of it as well. So where I was at in my life, I had when I finished college, I stopped competing. I stopped exercising 7 million times a day, and but my diet was still the same. So all this weight that I had on as an early, as younger, just came back on, and it multiplied. I was super heavy, super unhealthy. My skin was bad. My digestive tract was in ruins. I brain fog, all the things that everybody talks about that comes with it was there, and I was experiencing it now. And thankfully, My relationship with my wife was amazing. We were starting a family. So there was all that positive stuff happening. But at the same time, my health was literally in the toilet. I was always sick. I couldn't keep food in my body. I'd eat it and come right out. And I really thought that was going to be the rest of my life. So at that time, I had gone back to graduate school. I was really focused on archaeology and anthropology and learning from our ancestors, learning from the stuff we're digging up out of the ground that is hundreds of thousands of years old, millions of years old. And there was sort of a light bulb moment years ago when I realized that almost every single prehistoric technology, literally everything that I was studying, that I was spending all of my time studying, was all of these prehistoric technologies had something to do with food, like getting food, processing food, storing food, redistributing food, cooking food, making it healthier, whatever it is. Like there's the link between our technologies over 3.5 million years and our diets and our changing diets during that time. There was this huge, massive link. And this it's just as strong as the link between our dietary change and our evolutionary change in our bodies. Like literally the the technology transformed our diets and our diets transformed our bodies. And here we are as modern day Homo sapiens with these massive brains and these huge bodies, really small teeth, really small digestive tract, built on the backs of these technologies. And here I was, like, I'm looking at Weight Watchers and all these diets for my entire life, trying to lose weight, trying to get these answers, listening to doctors and nutritionists and coaches and all these people giving me terrible advice. And it turns out that I was in the midst of in a PhD program studying exactly what I needed to study to learn how to nourish my body. So all of my research focused changed to being directly associated with ancestral diets. And I started to like, okay, this makes sense. And I started to implement the things that I was studying and I was learning into my own diet, into my family's diet, and all of these problems that I've had my entire life started to disappear, and it was transformative. And right in the middle of all that, when I really started to get a grasp and a handle on my health for the first time ever, I got contacted by National Geographic to do this show called The Great Human Race. And this was at a time when TV, all these survival shows have been on for a very long time. So, the reality survival TV shows, and they were getting sort of silly. Like they've been silly already, but they really started to get silly because each network was trying to outdo the other one and make something exotic. So we had like things like Naked and Afraid, and you'd have two people, a man and a woman, who didn't know each other supposedly, and they'd meet for the first time naked in the middle of the woods in some remote area, and they had to survive for 28 days, and that sort of thing. And then it got even sillier where people were handcuffed together and all this crazy stuff. Well, just for ratings. And, I love survival. I love ancient technologies. I love these things, but it even got a little silly for me.
What's a little sad is that people probably still watch that.
Oh, absolutely. They watch the heck out of it. That's why they were doing it. It makes great TV for like 2:00 in the morning when you can't sleep. It wasn't my kind of TV. But so anyhow, National Geographic context, listen, we got an idea for a show, and it was brilliant. It was, we really want to take advantage of this sort of survival TV genre, like wave that's still happening, but we want to use it to tell a really important story of our shared ancestral past. Like that sounds cool. And it was really hard to do though, because it was a combination of, reality survival TV, but a real message that has, real authentic, archaeological grounding and foundations in it, and having to merge those two at the same time was a real trick, but it was fantastic. It was such an incredible experience in my life to be able. I've been studying and teaching these things at this point for decades, and now I got to live it. Like I got to live this stuff that I'm studying. Teaching a business class and then owning a business is not a big stretch. Teaching about life 500,000 years ago and then living life 500,000 years ago is really it's like a time machine. It was amazing. But what came out of that was this. I got to live. The show was 10 different episodes. Started at 2.5 million years ago, went to 4,000 years ago. And I got to live, even for a short period of time. Each episode, we were like hardcore filming for about 10 days at a time. But I got to live all of the major time periods of our ancestral past, using only the technologies that we had at that time and eating only the same kind of foods as we would have had access to, prepared in the same way as our ancestors did. And I felt amazing. Like I literally never felt better. No, believe me, there were times that I was hungry. There were times I was covered in bug bites. There were times that I was miserable. But as a human, I really never felt better. And when we were done filming that show, I was convinced like I'm on the right path. Like we are doing the right things. There's still a ton to learn. There's still a ton to kind of assimilate, figure out. But I'm definitely on the right path.
That sounds like a massive, very bright green light, like telling you to keep going forward. That sounds like such a cool experience. And correct me if I'm wrong. You kind of just touched on it. You said you got to live these different lives essentially. So like for example, you would be like butchering an animal with a rock, basically like a sharpened rock or whatever the tool that would have been used in that period of time.
Yeah. So each episode, again, it's funny because at the time that we were figuring out how each episode was going to go, the message we were going to try to send through them, the technologies would have. At that time, the oldest stone tool ever found dated to 2.5 million years old. So we started the series at 2.5 million years ago. After we started filming, there have been a few finds, most importantly, one called the Lamechway tool, which dates to 3.4 million years old. That's the earliest stone tool. So it predates what we were doing by almost 1 million years. But in general, we identified 10 different time periods where something or a suite of advancements or technologies were invented that allowed us to take a step or do something different, interact with the outside world in a different way. So each episode took place where that technology was first invented, and or technology or technologies, and we were restricted to only using the technologies we know about from those time periods to survive, to clothe ourselves, to feed ourselves, to protect ourselves. So, for example, the very first episode took place in Tanzania. We only had access to Oldowan stone tool technology. We didn't have fire yet. Fire wasn't for another 500,000 years. So we could only use that stone tool technology to get our food, to protect ourselves, to do whatever we needed to do. But we couldn't have fire, so we couldn't cook our food. One of the interesting things about fire is even though our ancestors stood upright and started walking on two legs somewhere between 5 and 7 million years ago, we still think they spent their nights sleeping in trees for protection. Right. So because they didn't have any other way to protect themselves from some of the nasty, if you think the predators on the African savanna are nasty now, those weren't the predators 2.5 million years ago. They were the ancestors to those predators were the predators then, and they were nasty. Things like saber-toothed cats, for example. So that during that episode, we were eating, we scavenged a carcass on the savannah, raw meat, raw marrow, raw fat, raw organs, raw all of that, and couldn't cook it. And we were sleeping up in a baobab tree because we had nothing to protect ourselves.
That's insane. That's like the amount of people in the world that have had that experience is extremely small. But then the amount of people in the Western world that have had that experience is smaller still, probably like an incalculable number. That's pretty cool.
Oh, life-changing for me. It completely transformed my perspective on not only our past, but also our place in the world today. It's amazing.
I was going to ask, is there a particular, throughout the recording of the show, is there a particular moment or maybe like a particular episode that really sticks out to you that was like, holy cow, this is wild what I'm doing?
The two, all of them were fascinating.
Just to interject real quick, where's the show available? Because I kind of
Amazon. You can get it. So it's a National Geographic production, but and what's really cool about that production is so there's two different entities. There's National Geographic Society and National Geographic Productions, I guess it is. One does like the TV stuff, and the other's like National Geographic Magazine and the research and all that. Most of the network. So most of the TV programming on National Geographic Network is just done through the network and is outsourced and that sort of thing. But this particular project was a collaboration between both the society and the network, which really helped make it, academic and powerful and authentic. So, but it's available. I know it's available on several different platforms, but I know it's on Amazon.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll have to watch that. And then you were, sorry to interject, but you were saying like the two.
So the two I think that were really interesting. If you're only going to watch one episode, I would. Well, my wife gets mad at me because she likes them all, but my favorite one is episode 6. It takes place in the Republic of Georgia. Is about 45,000 years ago. We're living in this magnificent cave. But what I love about it is that it is the first time we have access to a complex weapon system, the atlatl, and we get to hunt with an atlatl, take down a wild boar. It's I love that episode. Um, that weapon system is the first complex weapon system in the world.
That's
And
the atlatl is where you throw. It's like a little throwing thing.
it's got that little like lever that you throw with. And there's different examples of it. It spreads literally all over the world. The bow and arrow doesn't even spread around the world. The bow and arrow doesn't make it to places like Australia, for example. Never did the bow and arrow make it there, but this weapon system made it all over the world. So that one's cool. And then what the most dangerous? I mean, we had issues with hyenas, we had issues with lions, we had issues with all sorts of things. I got an infection that they didn't really show it on TV, but they almost had to life flight me out of Uganda. We made it to the Nile. I had a line that was going septic and was running up my arm. Anyhow, but the most dangerous thing actually happened in Oregon. We were kind of representing the two different ways that early Americans made it into America, right? And one was a land route across the Bering Land Bridge, and the other was by sea that went along the coast. And I was in this dugout canoe and coming down the coast in Oregon on the Pacific, and it was freezing cold. And I ended up capsizing trying to land this thing. It was in the water forever. And I still can't believe they didn't bring me to the hospital because it took me hours to get my core body temperature back up. I was hypothermic. It was horrible. But that was probably the most dangerous of all the things, of all the places we were in the world. I mean, we were in Oman, we were in Mongolia, we were all over the place. The most dangerous moment for me was actually right off the coast of Oregon, of all places.
In a dugout canoe. Yeah, that
In a
sounds
dugout
pretty
canoe.
sketch.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty sketch. But I mean, like I said, I'm gonna go watch those shows. That sounds like such an incredible experience to have, especially given like your background in anthropology and archaeology and all that stuff. It seems like you were a perfect fit for it. And then, so I mean, that's like a life-changing event or experience in and of itself. But after that show, what was the period of time in between that and the book?
That's a great question. I had started a draft of pieces of that book beforehand.
Oh, cool.
But actually took a break on it because of doing the show. And then when I came back, I realized like this is something for real. Like there's really meat to this, no pun intended. And I buckled down and really started working on the book hard, and then was able to get a sabbatical. And the family moved to Ireland for the year as home base because from there we could travel to live and work with all these different indigenous groups around the world that we spend time with. I mean, even though Ireland is an island, the ability to get from Ireland to so many different places very quickly was super easy.
That's probably an interesting perspective or experience for you and your family as well. Them kind of being in the midst of this whole process, writing a book. And go ahead.
No, one of the things I love about the way, my research before was always like literally digging into the ground. Like, we were digging into the ground and doing these sorts of things, which is great. More recently, over the past 6 or 7 years, most of the research has been focused on ethnographic research, where we're going and living with and learning from and sharing food with and cooking with indigenous or traditional groups. And I've been very fortunate. And one thing my wife and I made a commitment to is we want to bring the whole family to do this. One reason is because for as amazing as that show was, filming that show, I will never, it took about 9 months to film that show. I will never get that time back with my family. And I feel this sense of loss. For as amazing as it was, life-changing, there was a sense of loss. I missed a lot at home filming that show. So all of this is very important. Even nothing's more important than my family. So okay, let's go we're going to bring the family. Part of it was selfish. I didn't want to be without them. The other part was if I'm going to go experience something super cool, life-changing, I want them to experience it as well. But a third thing that came out of it was really, really powerful. Was all right. I'm now 50 years old. when we were making this commitment, I was, I don't know, 44, 45 years old, whatever it was. You know, I have a certain demographic, a certain audience, right? So, you know, a 40-year-old man might listen to something I have to say because they can relate to what I'm saying. But what we're learning transcends, you know, males, females, teenage years, all these different. There's a lot of people that can benefit from the things that we're
It's
experiencing
human.
and learning.
It's human. It's
It's
not just
human.
like, yeah.
So a 17-year-old girl is not going to relate to my experience, no matter how cool it might be in the middle of, you know, Kenya somewhere. But they'll relate to my 17-year-old daughter, right? Or my 15-year-old son, or my 13-year-old daughter, or, you know, a middle-aged woman might relate to my wife experiencing the same thing. So I wanted to be able to expand the breadth of people that could benefit from what we're learning and what we're doing, and I think it really worked well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the title, like on your shirt right now, "Eat Like a Human," I think that's a, I don't know if you came up with that or whoever came up with that, that's a phenomenal title. It's so succinct. And I think it's the most apropos way to describe it really is. Like your whole philosophy is just to eat like humans eat. That's really it.
Yeah.
And my question to you off that is what does it mean? And this is obviously it's a whole entire spectrum of things, but as simply as you can put it, what does it mean to eat like a human?
It means many different things, as you mentioned, and it's one of the things I dive deep into in the book. But there's a couple of, I think, key takeaway points that I can make here just to sort of sum it up. Number one of the things that humans do differently than all other animals is we do something to our food before we put it into our mouths, or at least we should. We have we've outgrown and out-eaten our digestive tracts for beginning millions of years ago, and those same technologies, very simple technologies like stone tools or fire or ceramic vessels, allowing us to cook over that fire. Very simple technologies are transformative. They transform a raw material that our body has no business consuming or making use of into something that's safer, more nutrient dense, and more bioavailable. So, number one, eating like a human recognizes that we need to do things to our food in many cases before we put it into our mouths. And secondly, to go back to that earlier piece, is we need to make sure that when we're eating, we are eating the safest, most nutrient dense and bioavailable forms of the food that we're consuming. Now, finally, and this is, I think, really important, and it took me a very long time to realize this, because I remember I went from with this incredibly unhealthy relationship with food to then understanding food at a level that, oh, now this I know how to make this food safe. I know how to make it nutrient dense. I know how to make it bioavailable. My body and my health is literally transforming in front of my eyes as I look in the mirror. I feel it every single day. And as you can imagine, you dive down this rabbit hole, like, oh my gosh, I got to ferment this, and I got to make this, and I got to butcher this, and I got to do and all that's great. But the other key thing that we need to understand about eating like a human is that food permeates every aspect of what it means to be a human, right? We don't just eat to get nutrition, to get biological nutrition. A fully nourishing experience tackles and ensures several things are happening simultaneously. One is that we're meeting our biological needs, but the other is that we're meeting our cultural needs and our emotional needs, and for some of us, our religious needs or our political needs or whatever, all the different things that make up who you are. That meal done properly can fully nourish you, and that meal done improperly can harm you. It's more than just the biological nutrition.
Do you think there is a particular moment or maybe event or response to an event that we have changed that in specifically in the West? Because I mean, there's cultures that like the Maasai and people that you got to spend time with that are still eating more or less like they've eaten for however long. Do you think there's a specific time, event, or experience that humans collectively had that made us kind of veer away from that?
Yeah, I think there's two huge ones, and first, let me. I have to mention a dear friend of mine. As sort of a prelude to this. His name is Seamus Caulfield. He's one of my favorite people in the world. He's an incredible archaeologist from Ireland. I think he's maybe 83 years old at this point, and can still scale a mountain like a mountain goat. I mean, he's amazing. But and he's awesome. He's awesome at a lot of different levels. I can listen to him talk forever. He talks a little bit like Yoda with an Irish accent, like this sage that is just he's just imparting wisdom on you, and he looks at the world in very unique ways. And one of the things he said is he grew up in this little tiny fishing village in the northwest coast of Ireland in County Mayo called Belderrick, and he said he spent as a child 9 months out of the year barefoot. And he truly believes that one of the first, and what we're talking about here is really about connection. It's like connecting to our food, connecting to our environment, connecting to our community, one another, ourselves, all of this. And he said the first major disconnect for humans was when we stood upright. We took our noses, we went from 4 legs to 2 legs, and we took our nose away from the ground, because most other animals experience the world through their nose, and their nose, sniffing around, and they have these very developed nasal passages and all. I don't know all of it, but I understand this is what happens, and that's how they experience the world. Now we've stood upright, taken our nose now, for some of us 6 feet away from the ground. For me, it's about 4.5 feet. But anyhow, it pulled away from the ground, and that was a disconnect. The second one, major one, is he said when we put shoes on our feet. He says, those 9 months out of the year when I'm running around the bogs or down at the beach on the cobblestone or on the street, I experience the world through my feet. I think about where I'm putting my foot, because I don't want to put it on a sharp rock, or I don't put it on a thorn, or whatever it is, or something that's too hot or too cold. But I also experience the world through my feet with every single step. We put shoes on our feet. Not only don't we experience the world the same way any longer, but kind of literally become numb to it. We don't think about it as much anymore. Like you put boots on, you'll just tramp through thorns, you'll tramp through sharp rocks, you'll tramp through a swamp, and you don't think about it anymore. And I thought that was very important. And then as I thought about it further, said, okay, well then the third major disconnect was the agricultural revolution, where we took, before the agricultural revolution, when we were literally hunter-gatherers, everybody in a community had direct access to their food, where it came from, knowledge about their food. They were either hunting, or they were gathering, or they were preparing food, or they literally knew the person sitting next to them did one of those things. Like there was this complete, everybody was involved in their food system. When the agricultural revolution hit, we went from hunter-gatherers to food producers. Like we started producing food, and a large segment of the population was disconnected, didn't have to worry about farming, didn't have to worry about whatever. And a smaller segment of the population now was responsible for that connection and had that connection, but everybody else didn't. And the fourth one, which I think is the most extreme disconnect, is the Industrial Revolution, where we go from food producers to food consumers. The majority of the population are consumers. We go to the store and buy food that somebody else grew, harvested, butchered, killed, prepared, packaged, shipped, put on a shelf, labeled, and all we do is grab it and open it up and put it in the microwave. And in each of those last 2 steps, that disconnect is real, and it's powerful in a very bad way. And it's very difficult to fulfill all those things that food can fulfill for us as humans when we're so incredibly disconnected.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk about like grounding, like the actual act of touching your feet to the ground. I've never thought about how what's the word? Like on a macro level, like we've literally become more disconnected from the earth and from our actual physical environment. Like I'm thinking, when you were talking, I'm thinking of somebody who lives in a city, who lives in an apartment and then works from home and then gets food delivered to them. They actually maybe go days or weeks without touching unadulterated ground, meaning like maybe they go walk on asphalt or whatever. But like some people legitimately don't touch earth, which is crazy. And then you extrapolate that into the third and fourth point that you just mentioned. which I agree with you. I think you've read. I'm assuming you've heard of *Sapiens*.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, phenomenal book.
Absolutely, yeah.
He talks about how the essence of the agricultural revolution was to increase the lifespan while decreasing the quality of life of humans, which is pretty powerful. Based
Have
on
you?
what, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, well, I was gonna ask another question if you want to add on that.
Just real quick to follow up on that. For anybody who hasn't read *Sapiens*, read it. It's fantastic, or *Sapien*. But the other thing that is a little bit quicker to get to and digest is Jared Diamond wrote *Guns, Germs, and Steel*, *Collapse*. So he's written several books. He's a fantastic author. He wrote an article. It's only about 4 or 5 pages long, called "The Worst Mistake in the History of the Human Race." Just Google it; it'll come up. It's super easy. It's very accessible, and read it. And it's a fascinating read and take on agriculture. And he wrote this. There's a lot of people now, obviously, who are questioning the merits of agriculture, but he wrote this at a time when hardly anybody was really questioning this. And pretty much his argument is, if our ancestors knew what they were doing when they started farming, they would have dropped their hose and ran in the opposite direction. I mean, that literally is about what it is. But it's a really good. Seriously, it's only about a 15-minute read. It's worth it.
Yeah, *Sapiens* is heftier than that for sure. That's a pretty hefty read.
Yeah.
But my question is based on what you just said and those 4 points of disconnection and all the resulting issues that creates for a Western or a modern human being. What's the first step, in your opinion, to in the direction of eating like a human? So say you're that guy who lives in an apartment, who has no idea who makes his food, who doesn't smell the ground or doesn't touch it, nevertheless smell it, who doesn't know, see, or have any understanding of where his food comes from. What's like the first step for him to eat like a human, besides reading "Eat Like a Human" by Dr. Bill Schindler?
I think there's two things to start with. And again, I really want to reiterate, what we do here is teach people how to cook. We create incredibly nourishing food, working directly with farmers and making it in-house for people. But what we're really doing is creating connection. We're really trying to create connection. So if you come into our restaurant downstairs, there's no walls. Like, it's a completely open kitchen, and it's that way intentionally, so that when you come in, no matter what you're in here for, if you're just eating there to eat lunch, you'll see, listen, smell, hear all of the parts of food your food being made. And we make everything 100% from scratch. There's no two ingredients put together outside of our walls. We make all the cheese, we do sourdough breads, we butcher in house, all of that, so you can experience that and sort of begin towards that road of reconnection. And upstairs here in our nonprofit, the Eastern Shore Food Lab, we teach classes to teach you how to do those things at home. And those things are very important, but again, it's about connection. So to more specifically answer your question, I think there's two things, and they're going to sound maybe strange or extreme, but remember, the way that most of us are approaching our food and our diets and our health right now are really strange and extreme in the other direction. A quick example is, I was several years ago, the news was out. They were doing a piece on foraging, and they were following me around foraging around town or whatever. And I remember that the reporter asked, he says, "All right, how do you ask it?" He goes, what's the strangest food in the world to you?" I said, "McDonald's." He was looking for some sort of weird organ, crazy fermented shark thing from Iceland or something. And I'm like, McDonald's is the craziest thing in the world to me, or some level of that. It wasn't met with a lot of good response, but regardless, it is. But for most of us, that's our norm. If you think that eating something from McDonald's or an equivalent is even close to being in the range of normal, then what I'm going to say is going to sound really, really strange. But that's how far we've come. So we really need to go back the other direction. So one thing is, just get into the kitchen. At any level, get into the kitchen, whatever your comfort zone is. Any step in that direction is a positive step. I mean, if you're making, believe me, I want to say that you're bringing animals in and butchering them in house and making patés. That's where I want to get to, and fermenting all your vegetables. But even if you're making Pillsbury cookies from the thing with your kids, and instead you're making Toll House cookies because you're using your mixer, that's a step in the right direction. And it's a powerful step in the right direction. But to me, what has been very helpful to me, and I do dive down rabbit holes really deep and really fast and stay down there for a long time, for better or worse, is when I realized that for my entire life, trying to figure out my food, my diet, my health, and all of this, that when I realized I literally, for all that work and all that time and all that effort and all that advice, I knew nothing about food. I realized that I had to start really learning to cook food from scratch. If I wanted to learn about my food, I wanted to learn about anything that's for sale in the grocery store, I needed to learn how to make it in my home. So one of the things that I say all the time, and I mean this wholeheartedly, is if you want to make a difference in your life, first off, pick the food that you and your family or you and your partner eat all the time. I don't care if it is hamburgers and hot dogs or grilled cheese and tomato soup, whatever it is, be honest, pick the food that you eat all the time and do something about that food. Because, the first meal that I made entirely from scratch, 100%, was a Thanksgiving meal. Uh, and it took me months. I made all the cheese, I made all the charcuterie, I made all the bread, all of it was made entirely from scratch. And I remember when everybody left, some of it was good, some of it was terrible. Everybody was polite, but when everybody left, I literally went around the corner and I physically patted myself on the back. I'm like, yes, I did it. And I felt really good about it. Months of work for that meal, and it paid off. I was able to make it all from scratch. But the next day I woke up and I realized that I felt kind of empty. I didn't really do anything. Like, all of that work, I can talk about it. I could post pictures on Instagram about it. It was memorable, but it was one meal. Did I really change and impact the health of anybody at that table with one meal? Not really. That's when I started down a sourdough bend, because I realized that my kids eat bread every day. My kids eat bread every single day. If I want to impact the health of my family, forget about making this Thanksgiving meal extravaganza once a year from scratch. I need to start making their bread in the healthiest way possible. So every day when they have a sandwich, that builds up day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. So my advice is, take the meal that you eat all the time and dive down a rabbit hole, start looking at YouTube videos, getting some cookbooks, try to make everything from that meal entirely from scratch. Like, try it. I mean, some of it's going to be terrible. You might not even eat it. But at the end of that process, in an ideal world, you've learned how to make your hamburgers and hot dogs and your French fries and your ketchup entirely from scratch. You're going to do it forever. That's great. But even if you don't, the next time you walk into the grocery store, you are literally, and I don't mean to overstate this, this is 100% true, you are a different person. You are an informed consumer. You literally walk through the doors of the grocery store, and the marketing and advertising and all the product placement and all the bells and whistles and all of the things that they use in grocery stores to make us buy what they want us to buy, you're immune to it. And you can do two really powerful things. One is you can buy the healthiest version of those foods, because now you know not all there is to know, but you know more than you ever did about those foods. And number two, just as importantly, if you're going to buy those foods from this point forward, you're going to take your hard-earned money and you're going to support the food producers that are actually doing it the right way. Those are two very powerful things. So number one, learn to genuinely cook your food. Even if you're not going to do it every day, learning to do it at least once is powerful. The second thing, and this is equally, if not even more powerful, is take that connection to the next level. Like, okay, it's great to go to your butcher and get a chuck roast and bring it home and grind it and make a hamburger. That's awesome. But the act of actually harvesting something yourself, whether you're foraging or whether you're hunting or fishing or crabbing or clamming or collecting bugs from the sidewalk and eating them, whatever it is, that visceral, primitive act of connecting directly with a wild food and nourishing yourself and your family with it is probably the best education and connection you can give yourself. And I'm not suggesting everybody needs to go back and be a hunter-gatherer. There's not enough resources in the world for us to do this anyhow. But even just once a year or once a season, getting outside and collecting some berries, blueberries, raspberries, I don't care what it is, or getting on a boat and going fishing and taking that fish and bringing it through the entire process of getting it on a plate and nourishing your family with it reconnects you and recenters you and makes you look at the world, the grocery store, your diet, your health, all of those things in a completely different way.
I I think that's incredible advice. There's two things that come to mind. Firstly is I may have mentioned this before on the podcast, but my favorite meal. You think about how many meals you've eaten, right, in your life,
Mm-hmm.
and then if you ask somebody, "Hey, what's the most memorable meal?" There might be one or two that kind of pops up, but it's kind of crazy to me just to back up a little bit how much we eat and how little it affects us in terms of like our memory. It's like we just chow it down and then go on to the next thing. But so November of 2021, I believe, or 2022, I can't remember. I've been hunting since I was like 9 years old. I killed my first deer when I was 10. But we would field dress it and then we'd take it to the butcher and they would butcher it and bring it back. But it might have actually been as a result of your book, to be quite frank with you. I got hooked on the idea of I want to start butchering my own animals. I want to start butchering the hogs that I killed. I want to start butchering a deer. So in November of 2021, I killed my first deer with a bow. I had been hunting with a rifle, so I killed it with a bow. I field dressed it. I took it home, and I was living in Richmond, Virginia at the time, in my garage in downtown Richmond, hanging up. Like, people are walking by, like, what the hell is going on? Literally a deer just hanging down. I butchered it. I cooked it, and then I ate it, and I shared it with my family and friends. Without a singular doubt in my mind, that is my favorite group of meals I've ever had in my entire life. Because of what you just said, no other hands touched it but me. And I don't know if this is just placebo, but I think it tasted better. I think
I'm sure it did.
It did exactly what you mentioned, where that was nourishing to my soul. It was nourishing to my body because of the fuel, but also because of the process it took and the level of strain it took. I mean, I wasn't spot and stock hunting. I was sitting in a stand, so it's not that strenuous, but nonetheless, it was, just to speak to your point, it did change me, because now there's like this new thing that I'm like chasing in terms of the meals. I'm like, oh, every meal could be like this at some point. And then the second thing is the grocery store. I think you're so right about that. There's something that changes, because one thing that I do and what I get a lot of people to do is look at ingredients. Like I have a text screenshot on my phone of a buddy of mine. It's like, dude, you've got me telling my mom to look at ingredients in the grocery store now. And I'm like, that means I'm doing something right.
Well done.
Yeah, because so sourdough is a perfect example. There's two ingredients that are really needed in sourdough, correct? Three, I guess, technically.
3, water, flour, salt.
Yep. So 3 ingredients. Go to the store. Actually, anybody listening to this, go to the store, go to the bakery and look at the quote sourdough that they have. I can almost guarantee you there's going to be more than 3 ingredients, right? So then that compelled me, you know what? My mom has a friend who has a starter. Let me get some of that. I actually got my brother and my dad on the train, and I kind of gave it up. But long story short, if you go into the grocery store, and you can get into all like why grocery stores are shaped and formatted the way they are, and all the Whole Foods are on the outside, and everybody pushes you to the middle where all the processed junk is. But go to the grocery store and just look at ingredients, and there'll be like 50 ingredients in a food that actually needs 3. It doesn't make sense. It will change you. So I think that's phenomenal advice. Obviously, not everybody can go hunting, but I think you're right in that just making your favorite meal. And this is actually not to plug your book again, but I have a bunch of little bookmarks right here.
That's
because
awesome.
because of the little recipes and things at the end of the chapters, like French fries and fermented carrots and sourdough and all that stuff. I think that's a really helpful resource that you included.
Thank you.
Go
One quick
ahead.
thing about it's hard to talk about some of these things, because once you dive into it, like any other field or any other topic, you can dive and dive and dive and dive. And for people that are just starting to get a grasp on the importance of understanding their food and making changes in their diet, and maybe they're starting to think about, oh, maybe I want to start making fermented vegetables, or I want to start doing this and make kefir at home or whatever. What I'm worried about is having a conversation like this and diving so deep that it gets super scary. So while trying to risk the danger, trying to avoid the risk of that sort of danger, let me just say this. wherever you want to start is a good step. Wherever, whatever food you start with, whatever you decide to get into is a great step. And I can promise you, you will never be bored, because what you'll find is once you figure that out, then it's the next level of complexity, the next level of craziness. And you're going to start realizing that it's kind of like the Wizard of Oz. Like it's all a charade. Like the modern food system is all a charade. In fact, the beginning of Food Inc., if people listening haven't seen Food Inc., it was like a big food documentary in the '90s. It was brilliant, or early 2000s. They talk. You see a grocery cart getting pushed through the grocery store, and they talk about this mirage or this air of diversity, but really almost everything in the grocery store is made from the same few ingredients, just packaged differently and whatever. It Our food system is insanely fraudulent, I guess is the right word. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't take that first necessary step. But the really empowering thing is, I think, once you start diving into real, genuine food and understanding how it's made, you can read labels like never before. Like reading ingredients is great. Reading those ingredients with that sort of foundation of understanding how these different foods can and should be made is even more powerful. Like, for example, if you have ever made cheese, you can understand why if you pick up a ball of mozzarella and it says citric acid or lactic acid or acetic acid on the label, then it's fake and you should put it right back. Like, you need to have at least dove once into cheese making to understand why that's important. But all of a sudden, you can spot just by looking at that real food and fake food, right? Just from that. And you won't be bored. The other cool thing is the most powerful food technologies ever invented and implemented took place in like caves with clay pots and stone tools. Like and I mean this, there is no real genuine food in the world, real genuine traditional food in the world that you can't make in your own home kitchen. None. And I'm talking about from the most amazing cheeses in the world to the best pâtés in the world to the most incredible sourdough breads. Like, you can make them in your kitchens, in most cases with the tools you already have. And that is incredibly powerful, I think, as well.
Absolutely. It kind of reminds me of that adage, like if it wasn't around 1,000 years ago, don't eat it.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would you say to somebody? Because to go back a little bit, you're totally right in that one thing that I do is I get really deep on like a certain topic and then I lose people, especially in like actual conversations with like my friends or my family.
I know that problem.
It like you said, it scares people or intimidates people, and I'm sure that happens to me in certain instincts or incidents as well. But what would you say to someone who is eating those grocery store foods, who doesn't look at labels, who doesn't cook, and is living all right, doesn't notice really any massive health issues, works out X times a week, has a job, and doesn't have some like urgent health issue that's propelling them? How would you convince them to say, hey man, there's a change that needs to be made?
Well, there's, I think, a few things. The first one is I can speak to this as well, and something that happened with my wife, even in this past year, only a few months ago, I think, really speaks to it as well. We since we've been eating and living this way, being sick is not really a thing. Like, getting sick isn't a thing. And a few months ago, she wasn't feeling well, and she said something like, this is the first time in a very long time I don't feel well, and it makes me really appreciate how good I have been feeling, right? And I know that it doesn't seem like much, but the reality is, I think for many of these people who are going about their daily lives and they're eating the grocery store food and they're doing this and doing that, I wonder if they realize how good they can feel. For them, I would suggest for many of them, their status quo is not what it should be. And they don't even realize it because they don't know what it feels like to truly be nourished. But that aside, and I'll give you a quick example in just a second, but that aside, um, in addition, like I mentioned earlier, to the biologically nourishing qualities of real, genuine food prepared the right way, there's all the other aspects of it that help nourish us. So part of it is real. It should be no surprise that the most incredibly nourishing food on the planet is also the tastiest, also smells the best, also has the best texture, also is the most satiating. I mean, the reason we have these senses and why it's so sensual to eat food is because that's one of the mechanisms that we're supposed to be using to figure out how we nourish ourselves without all the doctors and without all the nutritionists and all the diet books and the magazines and the podcasts and the documentaries. Like, we are literally built with everything we need to figure out how we should be eating. It's our noses and our mouths and our fingers and our ears and all of this. So the other qualities of really nourishing food beyond just the nourishment themselves is important to us, and I think people are missing out on that. Even if it's just the flavor of grocery store food and the flavor of real traditional genuine food are completely different things. But it's also that those other connections that happen with it. When you go to the grocery store, you don't make contact with anyone that's been a part of your food system. The person who's grown the food, harvested the food, prepared the food, anything. Like, you literally, if you're lucky and you still have a grocery store that has somebody working a cash register instead of the mechanized, checkout things, you might interact with another human when you check out and you actually give them your credit card. But other than that, there's no connection at all to a system that literally built us as humans. Our relationship with our food and our environment literally built us and made us who we are, and we've been totally disconnected from that. So those connections from things like the farmers market and cooking together and meeting your farmer and all of those other things that are a part of a connected food system, even though they might feel like they're healthy and get it and going to the gym every day, they're not a part of that system.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I work for and am friends with Harry and Brett at Meat Mafia, and I know one of my buddies, Ryan Griggs, started a brand called the Regenaissance. A ton of people that I've been connected with as of late actually are full-fledged on the journey of trying to connect people with their ranchers, like, and their food and the food that they're consuming. And I think that's so important, and it really does change things because, even for example, I don't, do you know who Will Harris is?
Yep.
At White Oak Pastures, I had him on last week and got to go down to White Oak Pastures and just to go around his ranch with him, and to see and to hear the level of care that he has for this and that, and the knowledge that he has of, like, this little ditch on 3,000 acres of land. He's like, something about the most minute thing, just the level of awareness and knowledge. Something about it was fulfilling. I wasn't even a part of it. I don't even work on the ranch. I don't live on the ranch or anything, but it was like fulfilling to know that if I got food from him, it'd be from somebody who is so connected to that system that he's operating in and a part of. Something about it just felt good to me. And I think there's a ton of resources nowadays where people can do that. Like, there's a ton of direct to consumer, like meat delivery systems and stuff like that. There's a lot of, which I spoke with him about, there's a lot of fraudulent marketing and things like that, which is unfortunate. But I do think that, like, the proverbial shaking your rancher's hand is a good thing to do.
I mean, just that hand thing. I want to go off of that on two quick little side note stories that to me are very powerful. One, and a feeling of touch and hands is really important in food. I want to make a T-shirt here. We touch a lot of food here. We touch all the ingredients multiple times. I want to make some kind of a T-shirt here. It's like, it says something like, we've literally touched your food 307 times before you've eaten it. We're so weird about germs and stuff. Yeah. We literally, two quick stories. One is, when I was doing research for the book, my family and I, we went to Thailand to do some of the work for the insect chapter. And we were in a big open market in Bangkok, and it was fascinating to me. It wasn't the largest market I've ever been in. Some of the ones in Oaxaca were larger, but it was a beautiful, large market, and they were selling everything in different places in there. And the connection was incredible. Like in most cases, when you went in to get meat or animal products of any form, like you went in and you went to the farmer and you saw the animal, you said, I want that animal. And then they killed that animal and cut it up and you walked away with it. And so, I mean, nothing was hidden. I mean, it was complete transparency, which I think is, the safest, most incredible connected food system possible. I mean, they weren't killing cows, but a lot of the other
Yeah.
things were chickens, for example, and the like. But then what I thought was fascinating is you have this interaction where you have a consumer or a customer that's coming up, seeing the animal alive, talking directly to the farmer that's raised and cared for that animal, been there and not necessarily participated in, but at least witnessed the death of the animal, saw it getting cut up, and then what was just as visceral and powerful was at the end of the transaction, you had the person who was responsible for that animal touching the consumer's hand. I mean, they're exchanging money, they're exchanging of bags, and you just can't help. Their hands are actually touching. I'm like, that's crazy in a powerful way that's missing for most of us in the Western world. Like, there's no opportunity for that to necessarily happen. And I wanted to write about it in the book just like that. And I was met with some resistance because this book was published in the middle of COVID, and that sort of wet market thing was, everybody was, I wanted the right message to come across, and I was worried that it wouldn't in that context, but that was powerful, the touching of the hands. But I know you talked about sourdough earlier. One of the stories I love to tell about a study that was recently done with sourdough was there was, I forget who the researchers were, but they went around the world and they collected bread from different bakeries and they analyzed them to see if they could identify, because obviously every location in the world has different populations of wild bacteria and yeast that go into the sourdough. And they wanted to see if they could look at the bread and identify the bakery that it came from. And they could. It was great. And they, that was one. But what they found was even better, that they could identify the bread down to the baker. The bacteria on the baker's hands impacted the final bread. And what was even cooler was that they then went, and I forget exactly how they figured this out, but they were able to show that the wild bacteria and yeast that was in the dough also impacted the population of bacteria on the baker's hands. It was a symbiotic relationship. Just the baking of the bread and the touching of the bread really impacted both the bread itself, but also the baker. And then obviously the consumers who are consuming the bread. That's a food system that, I can get behind.
Yeah, that's a very cool story. The wolf. I've never been in an open air market like that in Thailand, but that sounds, it sounds almost foreign to the Western mind. I feel like that would be met with, you're exactly right. I feel like that even the idea of that would be met with a lot of resistance in a lot of places in America. But to me, I kind of want to go, check that market out, to be frank with you. But one of the things that you said that I think is so important is just the idea it is necessarily what we eat, but it's how we eat it. Before we dive into that, I'm curious, is there any foods other than McDonald's and things like that, any whole foods that you just will not touch, that you and your family will not even, no matter how they're cooked or anything like that?
Yeah. So I have myself have had issues with oxalates. So I'm conscious of plant toxins. And one of the things that we do a lot of, both in our home and here at the restaurant, is we spend a lot of time, effort, and energy in detoxifying plants before they're consumed. So if it's grains, it's sourdough. If it's if it's seeds or nuts or legumes, they're being soaked or sprouted, or that sort of thing. In fact, a lot of my research for over 20 years has been focused on traditional and ancestral ways of processing plants to detoxify them. And with all of that work and all of that hands-on experience that I have never come across a valid way to get rid of or mitigate the issues that oxalates can cause in plants. So until I find something else out, we just avoid high oxalate foods. So things like spinach, Swiss chard, rhubarb, almonds, sesame seeds, poppy seeds, beets, we don't touch. We don't serve them at the restaurant, and we don't have them in our home.
Well, just to clarify, oxalates are like a defense mechanism for plants, correct?
It looks like oxalates serve two major purposes in plants. One is as a defense mechanism, and the other is it does something to help regulate minerals in the plants and helps distribute them. I don't exactly know how it works, but a lot of people might be listening, and if I hadn't experienced my own issues with things like oxalates, I'd be wary of somebody talking about it like this as well. I mean, it's just been drowned into us our entire lives. Plants are going to say, and it's still a major sort of a message today, right? Plants are going to save the world. We should be eating plants if we're going to be healthy. And I'm not an anti-plant person at all. But I'm an anti-some plant person, right? There's issues we need to be aware of them. All plants have some level of toxin in them, and it's hard because that word toxic to us in a modern context is so like, oh my God, it's toxic, it's going to kill us immediately. And when we have that sort of perception of it, it's hard to grasp the idea that all plants have some level of toxin in them. But some of these toxins, the harm that they do to us is partially based on dosage. It's partially based on what we're eating it with. It's partially based on our own, biochemistry. It's based on a lot of different things. But the reality is, things like cinnamon, the flavor cinnamon, it is a toxin produced by the bark of a tree to ward off disease and fungus and bugs. And a little bit of cinnamon we enjoy in our whatever lattes or our gingerbread or whatever, but a high dose of cinnamon can make us very, very sick, right? Some of these toxins we like as different flavors. Some of these toxins are medicines, and some of these toxins can become poison. And in some cases, they can be all three depending on how they're consumed by us. I just wrote a blog post about this a few months ago, but black pepper, pepperine, the thing that makes black pepper peppery is incredibly toxic. Highly, I mean, actually, that's another. We don't use black pepper any longer. Just as a quick side note, unripe fruits tend to have a higher toxic load than ripe fruits. And I know everybody on like the lower carb thing are talking about eating like unripe bananas because they're not as unripe fruits are inherently more dangerous than ripe fruits. And it's part of the plant's biochemistry. It's purposefully done by the plants because the role of the fruit is to deliver mature seeds through the digestive tract of an animal that ate them, and it gets deposited in a pile of manure somewhere. And that system doesn't work if the animal's consuming the fruit before the seeds are mature. So in many cases, in many species, a fruit is toxic, in some cases highly toxic, until the seeds are mature. Then that toxin gets turned off. That fruit is sweet and it's delicious and low or no toxins, and then the seeds can get distributed. Pepper is the fruit of the pepper bush, and the black pepper is an unripe fruit. So not only does it have this toxin, it's also unripe. White pepper, on the other hand, and quite often a lot of the toxins, obviously in many cases, appear on the skins of things in higher concentrations than on the inside because they're warding off disease or insects or predators or whatever it is. So white pepper is a mature peppercorn, pepper fruit, that's not only mature, it's been fermented and the skin has been removed. Now, it doesn't have the same punch that black pepper does, but is a lot safer on all toxic metrics than black pepper is. So we use white pepper here.
Yeah, so my dad's growing a lemon tree, and I'm certain that the knowledge and the awareness that your book gave me sort of played a role in this. But I'm sitting there looking at this lemon tree maybe 3 months ago, and I posted something on my Instagram about it. And it's got these thorns. Like my brother has a scar because he accidentally like ran into it one time, and it cut. They're serious thorns. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, let me step back. Your book and Sapiens, for the first time in my life, made me realize that from a biological standpoint, plants don't want to get eaten. And you just mentioned fruit, and I'll kind of get into how that relates. That was the first time I'd ever realized, like, oh, wait, a plant doesn't want to just get taken out of the ground and destroyed, right? Like it wants to survive, it wants to propagate and all these things. So I'm looking at this thorn and I'm like, okay, this is clearly a defense mechanism. There's no argument about that. Like that is to ward off predators from landing on it and trying to eat the fruit by puncturing. So if there's external defense mechanisms, logically to me, it would make sense that there's internal defense mechanisms as well by way of oxalates and different things like that. And then I thought about fruit and I'm like, okay, what is the fruit then? Well, a fruit is the thing that has the seed. And as you mentioned, when a fruit gets ripe, what does it do? The number one, the aroma can change. Number two, the color changes. It becomes more bright and more appetizing. What does that do to somebody like myself or a plant or another animal? Maybe I should eat that. It's sweeter. It tastes better. So then, like you said, animals eat the fruit, they poop it out, and then that propagates the plant. All that to say, the paradigm that I'm getting at is plants don't want to get eaten, just as you and I don't want to get eaten, right? It's like, it's not like they want to live. And I think that's so important to realize because as you mentioned, it's like the plants will save the world and all this stuff. And I'm also not an anti-plant person. I just ate some sauerkraut. I love sourdough bread, as we mentioned. But just the idea that understanding that first for me was big. Like starting at that point, okay, plants don't want to get eaten. So if I'm going to eat said plant, how can I do it in a way that's going to mitigate those damaging effects? Fruit, fermentation, all these things. Is there any? Oh, actually, no. You mentioned potatoes on a podcast I listened to. What's your take on potatoes, particularly?
If you think about, it's a fantastic question. If you think about basic biology, plant biology, it's it's much easier to sort of comprehend where and when toxins can become a problem and when they're not. So things like potatoes, plants that have underground storage organs, we call them. So roots, corms, tubers, that sort of thing, where the plants put a lot of energy and effort into storing carbohydrates in those underground storage organs so that they can feed off them when things are leaner. So for example, for a lot of plants, when winter comes, they spend the summer, excuse me, summer and fall, engaged in photosynthesis, storing all this energy in these underground storage vessels. Because when the winter comes and the top of the plant dies and they're not engaged in photosynthesis, they're literally living off of all this energy. And then the spring comes and then sprouts and leaves and they start photosynthesis again. There's a couple things that are important. Number one is that is an important part of the plant, that it's spending a lot of energy and effort protecting, and it does. And in that case, you can guess that in most cases, it's probably pretty heavily guarded using chemical defenses. So it's probably pretty toxic. And just as like I mentioned earlier with the pepper, a lot of times the skin or the outside covering of an important part of a plant has a higher toxin load than on the inside. And that's because that's where the danger really exists for fungus and bacteria and disease and predation, insects and all sorts of things. A potato is a fantastic example. I know people love potatoes. I love potatoes. I was brought up in the 70s where, not only are potatoes great, but the skin's even better. And that's where all the vitamins are. And I used to I'd eat a baked potato. I'd force myself through the inside so that I could just put a huge pat of butter inside of the skin and eat it. A little bit of salt. Oh my God, I still love it. But what I went to Bolivia and Peru and did a lot of research down there. I went down into the heart of where the potato was first domesticated almost 10,000 years ago. And the story that I remember hearing in Mr. Schumann's class in 8th grade was, by the time the explorers came to the New World, there was between 300 and 500 different types of potatoes already under domestication. And that's true. What Mr. Schumann didn't tell me in 8th grade was that, he probably didn't know, is that almost every one of them would have killed you if you ate it without processing it properly. The wild ancestor to potatoes is extremely poisonous. And a lot of the heirloom landrace version of potatoes that are still, many of them are still grown today, will make you sick or kill you if you eat them without proper processing. the potatoes that we have in the most American grocery stores are sort of dumbed down version of those potatoes. Like they've been selectively bred over generations to reduce that toxin load, but those toxins are still present. So things like glycoalkaloids, which are present in potatoes, are nasty, and they're higher in higher concentrations on the skin. So if you take nothing else away from this conversation than these two things, as far as potatoes are concerned, please listen to me on this because it's 100% true. Number one, peel the potatoes. Peel the potatoes. There's no reason to not peel the potatoes, even if the skins had more nutrition in them than the inside of the potatoes, which they don't. But even if they did, it's not worth it. Get rid of it because the higher concentration of toxins are in the skin. And as a sort of example of why this is important, for all the time I spent in Bolivia and Peru, and the massive amount of potatoes that I saw eaten by everybody, prepared in a number of different ways. I mean, we were eating potatoes with clay, we were freeze drying potatoes, we were cooking potatoes, we were boiling potatoes, we were frying. It didn't matter. All except for one time, every potato was peeled. Every potato was peeled.
Wow.
And no matter what, I was living with Aymara Indians, I was living with Quechua Indians, and I said, why do you peel the potatoes? Because that's the poisonous part. Every time. So peel the potatoes. Number two, if you ever see that green sort of tinge on a potato when it's stored in properly, throw it out. It is not food. Compost, I don't care what you do with it, don't eat it. That green spot is an indicator that the toxin load is at really dangerous levels. And if you don't believe me, Google it. People go to the hospital every year from eating basic russet potatoes in the grocery store. The thing that's important about that green spot, though, is that green spot is not the toxin. The danger is somebody sees that green spot and they're like, oh, I'm going to cut that green spot off and I'm going to be fine. That green spot wasn't the toxin. That was just an indicator that potato is really, really dangerous. And it's throughout that entire potato. Get rid of the entire thing. So at least peel them and don't eat green potatoes. That's number one and two. But the reason I went down to South America was to see how they still traditionally process the toxins out of potatoes. And there's several ways to do it. You know, we were leaching them and freeze drying them. We were eating them with clay, which is a really powerful way to mitigate the issues of the toxins. Special kinds of clay that help bind with the toxins. But one of the other things that is done, especially in Peru, is making of something called tokash, which is fermenting potatoes. And in this case, they're fermenting massive amounts of potatoes for like 6 months to 2 years. But even a little bit of fermentation can help deal with the toxins. So at home and also here at the restaurant, we take potatoes, peel them obviously, and then we cut them into whatever the finished thing shape is going to be. So if it's French fries, it's cut like the French fry. If it's potato chips, it's sliced. And then we ferment them in a 2.5% brine until we reach a certain pH. And then we take them and rinse them off, and then we cook them in high quality animal fat. And that solves or helps deal with a lot of the issues of potatoes. But to just sit there and eat potato after potato after potato can actually get quite dangerous.
Yeah, are you familiar with Steve Rinella, meat eater?
Yeah.
I don't think I'm messing this up. Maybe I am a little bit, but he has a couple episodes in South America, and I think one of the episodes maybe in Ecuador, somewhere in that general region, where he's with a fishing guide, and this village, this group of people, it's some sort of root. I don't know if it's a potato or not, but it's some sort of root. Mm-hmm. And he mentioned that they make it into like an alcohol. They ferment it into like an alcoholic beverage, and they drink a ton of it. But if I remember correctly, there's whatever it's called. If you eat it raw, like if you eat it whatever, it's poisonous enough to kill you. And he was like remarking at how like these people consume a ton of it, but it's just not in the way that it's going to kill them. They use a process like you've been mentioning this whole time that humans have been using to make it digestible. And you were just talking. Sorry, this is sort of. I guess it's related, but you just mentioned animal fats. When's the last time you had an industrial seed oil?
Intentionally? Years. Years. I'm sure something snuck. I mean, they permeate every aspect of the food system today, so I'm sure something has snuck in somewhere. But intentionally, it's been many years. We only cook with and consume animal fats, And as far as oils are concerned, we do coconut oil, olive oil, and avocado oil. And those are, for the most part, only for cold applications, making dressings and that sort of thing.
Why is that? Just because heating can change the properties?
Heating, animal fats hold up much better in higher temperatures than oils do. The nice thing, if I were a vegetarian trying to eat something fried, I would, which I'm not, but if I was, I would fry it in coconut oil because it has the highest concentration of saturated fats in it of any of those three. But coconut oil is the only nut oil that we eat. But the cool thing about coconut oil is you almost look at a coconut and the oil pops out of it. I mean, you don't need any major heat and pressure and all these other sorts of things to get the fat out. Plus, there's a lot of saturated fat in it. Olive oil and avocado oil are not nut or seed oils. They are both fruit oils. And same thing, at least as far as the first pressing is concerned, it doesn't require massive heat, massive pressure, massive temperature, massive chemicals, or any of those things. Now, once you get away from extra virgin olive oil, all of those things are used in different iterations of olive oil production. So you can take the same olives, and the first pressing is extra virgin olive oil, then it's pressed again to get olive oil, and then they macerate it sometimes, and then they end up putting chemicals in it. So the olive oil you get in like your typical salad dressing at a restaurant is just as bad as a soybean oil or whatever. I mean, it's terrible stuff. But extra virgin high quality olive oil is something we do include in our diets. But again, we don't really cook with it much. We use it as in dressings and mayonnaises and that sort of thing.
Interesting. Yeah, because I think there's obviously a lot of the whole topic of seed oils it's almost becoming mainstream, which I think is a good thing. But
Absolutely.
there's a lot of things that get conflated, I think, and all people are like, oh, olive oil is good, and as you just mentioned, it's not necessarily always the case. To switch gears a little bit, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. I appreciate your take on it because it's pragmatic. You're not very dogmatic about food. It doesn't seem. Some people that come to mind, I think God has a sense of humor because I kind of came to this realization recently. There's a guy named Liver King, who his name is Brian Johnson, spelled Brian Johnson. He is on one end of the spectrum, and he's mid-40s, whatever. Very wealthy guy, decided to live this way and put it on social media. There's another guy named Brian Johnson, spelled Bryan Johnson. Are you familiar with him?
No.
The guy who. Oh wow! So he's the
I don't
guy
think so.
He's like the anti-aging guy. He's trying to reverse and slow aging.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I didn't realize that was his name. I know who you mean.
So they have like the same exact name spelled a little bit different. They have entirely opposite. They're both extremely wealthy. They have entirely opposite ends of the spectrum. And I think I actually read this earlier as I was skimming through your book. The answers are not in the extremes. What are your take on those types on like Liver King style food ideology, and then this Brian Johnson guy?
Put me on the spot. So this is my take on it. And I do not have all the answers, and I'm learning new things every day. And you got I'm coming from a place where I've been able to, I don't even say regain my health, gain my health for the first time in my life. And the most important things to me, right, are my relationship, my wife, my family, my kids, and my community. And so living life, experiencing life through food, through all the other things that we as humans do is incredibly important to me. And I don't want to die. I want to live a very long life, and I want to live and I want to enjoy that life, the entirety of it. I enjoy food. I enjoy cooking. I enjoy sharing food. And one of my favorite things in the world to do. Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday on the planet. We had 19 people at our house. We all sat down at the table. One of the things I love to say is one of the best problems to have is a table that's too small. And I'm telling you, we had a table that was too small and enjoyed every second of it. But I say that because health isn't found in these extremes. And even if at some level, this is just my take on it, getting to that extreme increases your life by several months or several years. is it worth it to spend the next 40 years of your life, doing all of these crazy things and impacting your day at that level just to be able to do that same thing for a little bit longer? And I don't know if I'm making sense, but the way I take some of this, so I think biohacking at certain levels is awesome. I mean, if you can realize that, magnesium and potassium are missing in your diet, which for most of us it is,
Yeah.
and you can supplement with that and it changes so many things, awesome. But if you have to spend 5 hours out of your day doing all of these crazy things to increase your life by a certain number of years, and I question whether it's worth it. I'd rather be spending my time doing something a little bit differently. So as far as that extreme biohacking on that level, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'll change my mind in a year. Every year that I get older, the more I worry about what's down the road. But I can tell you, I'm 50. I'm about to turn 51. Eating ancestrally, enjoying every part of my food system, and connecting with it has provided me with health and a life that's better than it's ever been, even from when I was a Division I athlete. And that's, I think, a pretty cool place to be. And it is in that moderation. Like I don't eat a lot of bread. When I do eat bread, it's 100% sourdough. I don't sit there and get drunk, but my wife and I enjoy a glass of wine every night. That's kind of where we are with a lot of this. As far as Liver King is concerned, it's an interesting one and I'm torn because the Western world has been so anti-organ for so long that I love the fact that somebody is with such a large platform is raising awareness about the importance of organ meats. Love it. But at the same time, the pendulum has swung so far ridiculously on the other side that it's hard to take it seriously. Like there's nothing, I can guarantee you, none of for as nutrient dense and bioavailable as it may be, none of our ancestors for 3.5 million years sat down and ate a plate full of raw beef testicles and thought that it was something that they needed to do. Like, it just didn't happen. So this is my example and my kind of response to this pendulum with the organ meat swinging the other way. Now we are a whole animal butcher here at the shop. I take it very seriously. In fact, I'm probably, as far as food related things here, that's what I'm most passionate about. It's a complete nose to tail approach to animals. But one of the questions that people ask me all the time is, okay, well, how much liver should I eat? Like how many kidneys should I eat? And I look at them, I'm like, that's a strange question. And my response is, well, if you went to a hunter-gatherer and they just got back from hunting and they're carrying whatever they just, killed on their shoulder, and you looked at them and said, how much liver should you eat? They're going to look at you like you have three heads and say, as much liver as this thing has, and then I'm going to eat its kidneys and its spleen and its heart, and I'm going to eat all the meat and all the fat and everything, and then I'm going to go kill another animal and get that liver. Like, I don't understand what the question is. But we ask this question because we're so incredibly disconnected from our food that the only access that most of us have to a liver is going into Whole Foods, and you can go into the freezer section and there's pint containers of chicken livers. And for the first time in the history of the world, you can go in and you can buy 40 pounds of chicken livers and not take home another part of a chicken. And then you get home with all these livers and you're like, how much should I be eating? And it's the strangest thing ever. And I'm concerned that some of this like super pro organ, social media is swinging so far that people think that they need to eat massive amounts of all these things in order to be healthy. And our ancestors didn't do that either, right? They ate what was available to them and they ate completely nose to tail. So one of the things that we do here, I think it's sort of my answer to it, is we just developed a hot dog and a hamburger where it has the exact same proportion of fat, meat, liver, heart, and kidney that's in a beef cow. So when you eat that hot dog, it's like you're eating the same, you're eating nose to tail, through that cow. And I'm an archaeologist. I'm a primitive technologist. I guess I'm a chef now. I don't know what the heck I am, to be honest, but I certainly don't have all these answers, and I'm not sitting here with all sorts of mass spectrometry equipment and lab coats and all these things analyzing stuff. But to me, if you look at the archaeological record, the people, the indigenous groups around the world that I've spent time with, when they kill an animal, they eat the whole thing, and then they go kill another animal, and eat the whole thing. So these questions that we have, like how much liver should I eat, is a question the modern food system has created. It was never a question before. And that's sort of where I go for my kind of my inspiration and my information are places like that.
Yeah, the reason I wanted to ask you that, I appreciate that answer. What is because of your lack of like dogmatism. Like I think you have an interesting middle ground where you can appreciate Liver King's bringing of organ meat and that ancestral type style of eating to the mainstream. Um, I in terms of the Brian Johnson like extreme biohacking, he like takes like 100 and something pills a day and eats like that to me is extraordinarily odd. I don't find much value in that at all. I think he maybe be doing it in a he might be doing it in like a well-intended way, but to me, I derive a minuscule, if not zero, amount of value from that style of living. But I do think you're right in terms of the. It was never a question of how many bull testicles should I eat? Well, how many, like, did you just kill a bull? Then how many testicles does that have? Like, and then it's not like you should eat a wheelbarrow of testicles all the time, right? It's just not a normal problem. But you mentioned alcohol, and it's actually interesting because I was going to ask about that next. You mentioned wine. Is there a particular, I'm assuming wine's going to be your answer, but is there like a particular style of wine or alcohol in general that you believe to be congruent with ancestral practices or not harmful?
That's a really good question, and I will be honest, it's one that I am struggling with. I'll give you what my initial take is on it, and where I've landed right now. But I don't have a perfect answer for you. But I'll tell you how at least I think about it. Just like anything else, just like the liver conversation we just had, when I'm trying to sort out an approach to food for myself, or somebody's asked me a question, my knee-jerk reaction is, well, look to the past. Not that it's necessarily right, but what we were doing in the past is kind of has stood the test of time. And in many cases, not only has stood the test of time, but literally helped create us as humans. So you can't necessarily take something from 500,000 years ago and directly transplant it into modern life for a number of different reasons. But it's at least a starting point for me. And I think it's a great place to start. As far as alcohol is concerned, there's a lot of purists that are coming from an ancestral approach that would never touch alcohol. And you know what? If that's the case, awesome. But if your reasoning for not touching alcohol is because our ancestors didn't have it, then that's not true, right? That's not valid. And one of if you're bored, there's so many things that can take our attention now, like TikTok and whatever. But if you're bored and you're done with TikTok, start Googling the drunken monkey hypothesis. Look it up on YouTube. And the hypothesis is that mammals will seek out alcohol. Not just humans. Mammals will seek out alcohol whenever possible. And what you'll find is a whole bunch of videos of wild animals that have come across fruit that's wild fermenting fruit from the ground, and they get drunk on it. I mean, a giraffe is hilarious anyhow, but a drunk giraffe is one of the funniest things on the planet. It's hilarious. So our ancestors did not have alcohol every day, but our ancestors had alcohol in their diets. And to me, there's a lot of negative things that can come from alcohol. But just like anything else, taken in a larger context, there are some positive things that can come from it as well, at least certain kinds of alcohol. So this is where and again, more from done in moderation and in the right context and in the right social situation, there are some potentially emotional or cultural nourishing qualities to consuming alcohol in a certain way. We don't. Again, this is just where we are with it. I am certainly not an alcohol expert by any means, but this is the way my wife and I approach it right now. We don't we don't have sugar in our diets anyhow, at least refined sugar in our diets. So things like alcohols made with a bunch of, alcoholic drinks made with sugar is something we just don't have. It just isn't an option for us. We do drink red wine. We try to get organic red wine without sulfites, obviously, but it's difficult to get on a lot of different levels. We absolutely love dry farm wines for a lot of reasons, and usually when we drink red wine, we're looking for the lowest sugar content possible. And from that, I'm talking about natural sugar content.
Sure.
If it's fully fermented, it can be very low or zero. So that is our go-to drink. As far as beer is concerned, we don't drink much beer at all, but I will tell you, for the same reasons, I have a hunch, and this is nothing more than a hunch, but it's a hunch from a lot of experience, not beer drinking experience, but other experience. The same things that make sourdough bread healthier, more safe, and more nourishing, I'm convinced can make beer safer as well. And what I mean by that is a real, true sour beer is the way beer has been made forever, since beer has been made. The introduction of a sterile, a sterile wort when you're making beer, where you're putting it, where you're pitching a lab-made yeast culture into it to create the alcohol, is a brand new thing. It's only been around for about 150 years. Beer has always been sour, which means for the same way sourdough bread is made through a combination of bacterial and yeast fermentations. And of those, the bacterial fermentation is responsible for transforming the grains into their most nourishing forms, and also responsible for most of the flavors. I believe that that's the same thing with beer. Real sour beers. Now, there's all sort of weird, like fake sour beers out there, and they're doing lactic sours and all these crazy, funky, milky, like milkshake sour beers. But a real, true, wild fermented sour beer, in my mind, is the most nourishing, safest form of beer to consume.
Very interesting. I've actually never had a full, whatever you'd call sour beer, but I'm a this is purely anecdotal, but like a no added sulfites organic wine. I've drinking a whole bottle of that before, and then woke up the next day feeling fine. If I did that with a regular, I've had a glass or two of like cheap added sugar wine and felt really bad the next morning. So I think there's something to be said about that. I was just curious because I think that's another thing that people get really dogmatic about is alcohol, and I was just curious to hear your take on it. I would be remiss if I didn't, before we wrapped up, if I didn't ask more about sourdough, because I promised my dad and my brother that I would. Because for so long, I've like teeter-tottered. When I was in college, it's like, okay, eat exactly the same as you. Eat pasta, eat oatmeal, eat carbs, eat PB&Js, eat carbs. And then I kind of went towards like more of the carnivore animal base, where I'm like, bread, pasta, those things are probably more of an enemy. Then I got exposed to sourdough, and I'm like, holy cow, this world is amazing. What's your biggest piece of advice for like myself, my brother, and my dad, somebody like us who have sourdough starter? This is a little bit like nitpicky, but like who have sourdough starter, have made sourdough. How can we take it to that next step that you've probably gotten to?
That's a great question. So the first thing I'll say is this: for anybody who's thinking about sourdough and the potential of making sourdough or buying sourdough breads, real quick, there is no nutritional requirement in the human body for bread. Like it's not a thing. So understand that if you're choosing to eat bread, you're choosing to eat bread. It's not because you have to meet this biological need. Now, there may be emotional needs, there are cultural or whatever needs, but it's not a biological need. So with that said, because I did a podcast with Paul Saladino several years ago, and he asked me this question, and I was just saying, listen, there's no biological reason to eat bread, but if you're going to eat bread, then this is the safest, most nourishing, in my mind, the most delicious form of bread you can possibly consume. And it at least passed Paul's sniff test. So anyhow, and I truly believe that we don't eat a lot of bread. We make a lot of bread here. We don't eat a lot of bread, but when we do, it is always sourdough bread, real sourdough bread. Now, when I say sourdough bread, just like I mentioned earlier, real sourdough bread is made through a combination of both yeast and bacterial fermentation. It is, and it can or cannot have a sour note to it because of the lactic acid that's created through the bacterial fermentation. What everyone needs to understand is that there is no governmental regulation in any form requirement that you have to meet to call something sourdough. So you can go to the grocery store and buy your sourdough pretzels and your sourdough bread, and there is nothing sourdough about them whatsoever. Period. In fact,
Fraud.
most of the sourdough products in the grocery store are not sourdough. So I've talked to so many people that are like, I can't do gluten, I can't do this, but I heard sourdough bread was good, but I went to the grocery store and I bought the sourdough bread and it wasn't any difference. Well, there wasn't any difference because it isn't sourdough bread. The modern industrial food system is doing everything it can to fake all of these things, including adding sour stuff to bread to make it taste sour, to make you think you're actually eating sourdough bread. So the two best ways to get a sourdough product is, number one, make it yourself, or get it from somebody that you trust, a local baker, a local whatever. Um, to directly answer your question, or to take it to the next level, understand that what you're trying to do is control it. I mean, I have 3 kids, and taking care of 3 kids is a challenge. I taught forever. Taking care of a class of kids is a challenge. I can only imagine what it's like at a nursery school to take, but you're trying, when you're making sourdough bread, is you are trying to control and make work for you trillions of wild bacteria and yeast. And the best way to do that is to control as many variables as possible. So the first thing I would say, as far as taking it to the next level, is controlling temperature as much as possible. I won't go into it here, but you can Google it. Something called the calculations for the final dough temperature is extremely important. So one of the things you can do is, and it's going to sound onerous, but it's incredibly important. And it's easy to do. Get a stick thermometer, instant read thermometer, and every morning stick it in your flour and take a temperature reading of the air and take a temperature reading of your sourdough mother. And there's a quick calculation you can do. It's called the final dough temperature. You can Google it, and it'll spit out what temperature your water should be to put in, and that helps control one of the variables that can make your all of your final products more consistent. The second thing, and this is going to sound crazy, but I'm telling you, it's amazing. If you've already sort of nailed all those, zeroed all those things in, and you're doing a great job, but you want to take your sourdough baking to the next level, then get a pH meter. A pH, and you can get one from Hannah Instruments that's made for bread for about $130, and it will transform the way you think about your mother, your dough, all of those things, and you can really hone in on that really hard.
That's exciting. I'm sure they'll be stoked to hear about that, because I actually
Christmas present for your dad.
Yeah, that's a good point. I actually just remember this. The first time I ever made sourdough, every Christmas, me and my sister make a casserole, like, for breakfast.
Right.
And maybe it was 2 years ago. No, it was last year. I was like, you know what? I want to make this sourdough, or I want to make this casserole healthy, like with actual sort of what we've been talking about, like make it in a way that it's not necessarily a bad food. It's a food with better ingredients. So I made sourdough. I used sausage from an animal that I killed. We got raw cheese, all these things. So that's I wanted to share that with you. You and your book. I think I ended up looking like a blog of y'all's, like, on how to make sourdough. So they'll be super excited to hear that. My last 2 questions, really. One is it's kind of an idea from Tim Ferriss. It just forces somebody to really delineate what they're putting out there. But if you could write a tweet that everybody in the world could see, what would it say?
Wow. I wish you told me this an hour ago. I could have thought about it for a while. Really, it would just be one simple word. It would be reconnect. And I know we talked about it a lot today, but it is so powerful on every level, but it's not just with your food. It's become literally a mantra for our entire life. And by reconnecting with everything around you and being more present, whether it's present in your kitchen or present at your table or just present with everybody around you, you we're living night and day a completely different life.
Reconnect. That's powerful. I love the simplicity of that. Wow, that was good. Great answer. The last question is how I've wrapped up a lot of podcasts. And so Tyro Experience, the Tyro Experience is the name of the podcast. And I named it that way because I really think that the word Tyro came to me. I don't know if you've ever heard that word before. Most people have never. I've actually never spoken to somebody who's heard of it. It means novice or beginner.
Okay.
And it stems from the Latin word meaning young soldier, somebody who had just entered the military. And in many ways, when I was starting the podcast, that's how I felt. I still feel that way. I think my goal is to die a Tyro in some way or another. I think we all are Tyros because the way that I perceive a Tyro is somebody that's in an arena. They're aware of the fact that they're in an arena because a lot of people cower. A lot of people are in an arena. They try to get out. They try to escape. They try to hide. But a Tyro is somebody that's in an arena. They're picking up their sword and they're running towards the middle, ready to fight. So my question to you is what in this stage of your life are you fighting for?
I think right now it is direction. I know what I'm passionate about. I know what kind of change I want to make in myself, in our community, in our food system. There's so much to do that I need focus and direction in order to make the change that Christine and I are trying to make. So focus and direction, I think are the answers.
Another great answer. And perhaps I can, you talked about like a lot of change needs to be made and stuff like that, but perhaps I can shed a little light or a little gratitude for the fact that like you writing this book, you putting out the stuff that you put out has changed me, which has changed my dad, which has changed my brother, which has changed his wife and has changed my friends. So I think that's, you're certainly making an impact and I appreciate you for that.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
You truly, we work so hard with our heads, and I know you do as well, with our heads down, and we're just working. And feedback like that is so incredibly rewarding. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And the restaurant, you're in Maryland, like we mentioned, right?
Yeah.
Maybe one day I can make my way up to Maryland and get a meal. That'd be pretty cool.
Let us know. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Bill, I appreciate your time. Before we go, where can people find you? What are you working on? What do you want people to know about?
All right. So anybody who's interested in the book, it's called Eat Like a Human, and it's available on all the major publishing outlets or book outlets. It's not only in paper copy, but it's also on audio book as well. And I'm very proud. I did the reading. I actually had to audition for it. I did the reading for
your own book.
Yeah, I had to. But I'm glad I had to go through the process. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done is actually read that book. It was demanding. Yeah. And I cared so much that I put more pressure on myself. But we have the Modern Stone Age Kitchen is our restaurant, and you can find out information about what we do there at modernstoneagekitchen.com, and it's on social media at Modern Stone Age Kitchen. I am on social media at Dr. Bill Schindler, so at Dr. Bill Schindler, and my website is eatlikeahuman.com. So information about our classes, our nonprofit, the Eastern Shore Food Lab, and about the book can all be found at that website.
Very cool. Thank you, Bill. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
And with that, I hope y'all enjoyed the conversation. That was a real fun one for me, honestly. I read his book a while ago, and it was up to that point and up to this point still my favorite nutrition book I've ever read because of the lack of dogmatism. It's a very pragmatic approach to eating, and I think it's also the most aligned with the human physiology and psychology, and just the cultural and communal focus that he puts on food is something that I align with. So I really enjoyed that. I thought we covered a lot of good topics. I really think he's an interesting dude, and I'm grateful to have spent some time with him talking. Check him out on all his socials. Those will be linked in the show notes. Support him. Get his book. It really is a great read. Very easy to read because there's a lot of good stories, a lot of good recipes as well. So I hope you all enjoyed that conversation. Until next time, stand firm.